Good evening. I'm Pat Sicantelli, Superintendent of the Aurora City Schools, and we've got a special program this evening on internet safety. This program is a collaboration of 3 school districts and several communities, the ones that we represent, that we're going to present to you tonight to kind of help parents understand some of the ins and outs, the dangers, and really just giving you helpful hints on how you can keep your children safe in a difficult world with all the technology they have available to them. We've got 2 segments in our program that will start with a presentation from the commander of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. We'll introduce here in one moment. And our second segment will feature a panel discussion with our commander as well as the law enforcement officials from each of our communities. So to start our program this evening, I'd like to introduce to our show the commander of the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, Mr. David Frattare. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Pat.
So this is a topic that's important for all of us, and I know you've got a presentation here to share tonight, so we're happy that you can be here, and I'm going to kind of let you get it started and roll tonight with all the information you have, but in a topic that's timely for all of us as educators.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. It's certainly a pleasure to be here, and on behalf of the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, I'd like to thank Community Focus for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you tonight about the topic of internet safety. The Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force is one of 61 federally funded task forces spread throughout the United States with the mission of investigating and prosecuting the online exploitation of children. And one of the ways that we do that is to educate parents and students and community groups about the dangers of the internet and internet safety in general. And so one of the questions that we often ask when we talk to students and to parents is it worth the risk? Most students would agree that it is, and we certainly don't expect students to go home from our internet safety presentation, or we don't expect parents to simply tell their children never to use technology or the internet. When we talk about the risks, though, there are 3 important questions that we want parents and students to sort of ask themselves when it comes to this topic. Are you aware of your child's online presence? And that means understanding where your children are hanging out, some of the apps, the internet sites that they're using, and what they like to do for fun. Are you prepared to deal with today's technology as a parent? That means educating yourself about the technology, the limitations, the ways that it allows your children and your grandchildren to interact with the online world. And finally, are you aware of the online dangers? Okay. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force program has existed for almost 20 years now, recognizing that there are a lot of inherent dangers with regards to internet crimes against children, online exploitation, and the fact that adult offenders, in some cases juvenile offenders, can reach out to children to victimize them. Nowhere is it more apparent of the dangers of the internet than when it comes to a website known as Omegle. And this is a slide that we show during all of our internet safety presentations, and I think it really sums up the problems that we see when we talk about internet safety. Omegle is a video chat site that allows you within a few seconds to start communicating either via video or text message with random strangers around the world. Omegle's tagline, as you see at the top there, is "Talk to strangers." And even in the intro or the body of that first page, they warn you that predators have been known to use Omegle, so please be careful. And the site is extremely simple. Okay? In the right-hand corner down there, you see the option to either text or video. And when a user clicks on that video button, they are presented with a random person, a stranger in this case, that they can start video chatting with. And through our efforts and through some of the investigations that we've worked, we have seen children who have been victimized through exploitation efforts. We have seen suicides. We have seen drug use. We have seen a lot of sexual activity that occurs on webcams of individuals throughout the world. You don't need to look far to see all of the problems that exist out in cyberspace. We see article after article, news story after news story, dealing with the exploitation of children on the internet. Some right here in our own communities, some in other states, sometimes halfway around the world. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force is successful in that it brings together local, state, county, and federal law enforcement agencies who can investigate these cases and work together to make our internet and make technology safer for children. We're going to talk about 3 areas of the internet that we see the most concern with. Those areas include profiles and applications. They include online friends, and we use the word friends in quotations, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. And we also deal with the issues of sexting and cyberbullying, which in recent years have become a real issue for us as a task force. Now, as parents, as grandparents, I want you to look at some of the icons that you see here on the screen. These icons and these apps represent some of the biggest problems that we see as an ICAG task force program. Apps like Instagram and Facebook, which most of us are familiar with, have given way to apps like TikTok and Whisper and Monkey and House Party and a host of other apps that allow users to share content, personal information, create images and videos that they can then post online, all while interacting with individuals who they may or may not know. We've seen a rise in problems dealing even with apps like Twitch and Discord, which are popular with today's online gamers. And we see a lot of issues surrounding Xbox and PlayStation type games like Fortnite. All the icons that you see on the screen put you in close proximity to individuals you may or may not know. And that's one of our biggest concerns as a task force, in that users, children especially, are going out into the online environment and they're communicating with individuals that they know nothing about while sharing a lot of personal information. And the dangers are real. Okay? All of the apps that I just showed you, some of the apps that we talked about, allow you to share a lot of personal information. And we are constantly talking to children about the dangers of the information that they are sharing. Okay? Much like in the real world, we wouldn't leave our front door open and allow unknown people or random strangers to walk through our house, go through our drawers, look at the pictures on our wall. But that's essentially what happens every single day when online strangers or quote-unquote friends become a part of a child's social networking profile or the apps that they use. These apps, these networking sites, these video game sites keep that door wide open to allow random strangers into a child's life. Those online friends are what cause us a lot of concern as an ICAG program. We're also concerned with user-generated content, and we're dealing more and more with the issues of sexting and cyberbullying. Some of that we'll talk about in a little bit here. And we also want parents to be aware about the fact that in most cases their children are sharing their location with unknown strangers or online predators at an alarming rate. The apps nowadays clue into your GPS or your location services, in most cases sharing that information with a predator simply by what's being posted to a wall or to a comment section. All of the things that we've talked about here lead to the online exploitation of children. When we talk about online exploitation, it's important to talk about the friends that your children have online. Okay? It's easy to think that the word friends in an online environment would be the same as your friends in the real world. And yet we're constantly talking to children about how that's not exactly the case. Right? Your online friends are much different than the friends that you have in the real world. Okay? Online offenders realize that they can easily go out to Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and find hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of potential victims that they can exploit or friend or attempt to groom. Okay? Because the reality of the online world is that offenders or users of the internet can be anybody that they want. It takes all of 30 to 45 seconds to allow an individual to create a profile and then go out and attempt to find individuals, users, in a worst case scenario, children, that they can then turn around and victimize. And the offenders that we deal with as a task force have been known to be creative and manipulative with regards to their efforts to exploit children through a process that we call grooming. And grooming is essentially when an individual goes out and attempts to build an emotional connection or a relationship with that child through what they're talking about on the internet. Social media, today's mobile applications are full of personal information that offenders can use to groom a child. And through the course of our investigations, we've learned that offenders are not going to come right out and tell children what they want to do sexually or how they want to victimize these children. Grooming is a long, drawn-out process that allows the offender to get to know the child, to start to get the child comfortable with some of the topics that that offender ultimately wants to talk about. Get that child to a point where that child feels comfortable viewing pornography or creating pornography, or at worst, meeting that offender in a physical location so that that exploitation or that victimization can continue. How do we prevent online grooming, or how do we look for some of the red flags that are out there with regards to online exploitation? Okay. Ask your children who they're talking to online. One of the best things that you can do as a parent is have those conversations with your children, know where they're hanging out, and most importantly, know who they're talking to. As a parent, you should be able to go through your child's social media contacts, their friends list, their buddy list, if they're playing a video game, the friends that they have on those games. You should be able to identify each one of those friends. Your child should know the real names, the location of each one of those individuals online. Because if a child is talking to someone online that they don't know in the real world, they're in reality talking to a stranger. Okay. One of the other things you can do is look out for changes in their behavior. You as parents and grandparents know your children better than anybody. You should know what to look for with regards to their behavior. Are they doing things? Are they acting different than they used to? That may be an indication that something's occurring in their digital lives that they don't know how to deal with. Keep an eye out for potential gifts that your children may have received. I would hope that it would be obvious to most parents and grandparents if your children in elementary or middle school or even high school started receiving gifts or things in the mail from people that they don't know. One of the biggest red flags as a parent is if those gifts are arriving, if your children are interacting with people or receiving things, that's an indication that that address or your home address, the school address has maybe been given out to an online offender. Okay. And most importantly, teach your children never to meet up with strangers that they met online. There's never a good reason why your child should be leaving the house or making plans to meet with someone in the real world that they initially met online through a social networking site or a mobile application. In recent months, in the last year or so, we've started to see mobile applications and internet sites move to a more encrypted or protected environment. The most popular sites and apps nowadays are all utilizing some form of encryption or secret messages. For years, we've talked about the concerns that we've had with Snapchat. Snapchat, as we know, one of the biggest problems in the room as far as the ability for kids to send images that then disappear after a certain amount of time. Okay? The image that you see on the left there is the Snapchat timer. A user simply sets that timer, sends that image to a recipient, and that image then disappears after a set amount of time. Okay? Snapchat recently introduced for My Eyes Only, which is a private way to catalog and collect information that you don't want other people to see. And then finally, Facebook got into the game not too long ago with regards to their secret conversations. Encrypted end-to-end messages from one user to another that after a set amount of time, those messages will then disappear. Okay? Making it very difficult for parents, for grandparents, to actively monitor what's going on with regards to their child's activity. And then at the other side, making it difficult for law enforcement, for school districts in general, to try and keep tabs on what's happening with regards to their children or to their students. One of the things that we're constantly talking to parents about is the need to understand just how powerful the technology is and what it's capable of. Okay? As a parent or grandparent, maybe you've allowed your child to utilize a social media site like Facebook or Instagram. But understand that they can have multiple Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube accounts. Okay? If you're a parent or grandparent that has said to your child that it's okay to have Instagram or Facebook, our big rule obviously is that you have an account or a profile that you can follow as well. But make sure your children don't have other accounts. In the world of Instagram, we call those Finstas, which is a fake Instagram account. And children have been known to have anywhere from 2 to 5 to 10 different Instagram accounts. Okay? One they may share with their parents or their grandparents, the others that they may keep for trusted friends, trusted contacts, and they may use that account to broadcast inappropriate images or risque content that they may not want mom or dad, aunts, uncles, or grandparents to know about. Okay? You would notice in the Instagram sense, if your child has another account, by the little caret that is evident next to their screen name or next to their username. In the slide that you see here, we're showing you our Ohio_ICAC Instagram account. And you'll notice right next to it there is a triangle that is pointing down. And that triangle indicates that we not only have an Ohio ICAC account, but that we also have an account for our electronic scent detection canine, Canine Diana. And by linking those accounts on our Instagram, we can then essentially control both of those accounts from the same device. And we see that a lot with students who are engaging in inappropriate behavior or inappropriate activity online when they want to try and hide that activity from their parents, their grandparents, or individuals who may have responsibility over their devices. In recent years, we've started talking more about online gaming. And online gaming is a concern for us because we see a lot of teenagers and young children moving to online gaming at an early age. It may start out on a tablet or a mobile application. It may move to a more complex gaming system like an Xbox or a PlayStation. But as you look at these avatars or these characters on the screen, think to yourself how innocent they look. And think about how they look to your own children as they play these games. All right? The concern for us as a task force is that we want you to think about not the character that you see on the screen, but the character or the individual that is actually behind that character. Someone who may be a registered sex offender. Someone who may be an individual who is looking to entice or victimize your child and knows that they can start through a game like Minecraft or Roblox or Fortnite. All of the online games nowadays allow you to interact with hundreds, if not thousands, of users around the world. I remember when I was growing up, our friends would come over and we would play two-player games right next to each other. There was no online environment. There were no online friends. We enjoyed playing video games in the same house. Nowadays, when your children tell you they're going to online game or video game, 99% of the time, they're going to be playing with individuals who may be in their city, maybe in their state, but more likely are halfway around the world in another country. And these online offenders that we deal with know that video games and online gaming is a great environment to begin that grooming process or that victimization process. When I was up here, when I started working for the prosecutor's office and the task force in 2009, we had a case of an individual who utilized an online gaming system to initially establish a relationship with a child, convince that child's parents that he should come to Ohio from another state and live with that child. And while he lived with that child at that house, he ended up sexually abusing that child and victimizing that child over the course of several months. A relationship that started through an online video game platform. And so we want you to be aware of what your children are playing and who they're interacting with while they play these games. As parents, we like the idea of allowing our children to socialize and play in our own homes. But please make sure that you're checking in on your children every once in a while they're in the basement, while they're playing these video games, to make sure they're not giving out too much personal information, or worse, creating inappropriate content through these video games that then is finding its way to these offenders and to the internet in general. All of the things that we've talked about tonight have sort of brought us to this problem that we're dealing with now as a task force and as a society, and that is the issue of sexting. In the last 6 or 7 years, we have been forced as a task force to spend more time talking about the problem and the dangers of sexting. And in a lot of our internet safety presentations nowadays, while we still talk about the risk of dealing with online offenders or being victimized by an online offender, we're talking more and more to middle school and high school, and in some cases elementary school students, about the dangers that they face because of the content that they create on their own. And I'm talking about sexting. Okay? And make no mistake about it. Sexting is defined as any images or videos that a user creates, shares, receives or views, or keeps in their possession that depict a minor child either in a state of nudity or engaged in a sexual act. Okay? A typical selfie that a 13-year-old girl may send to her so-called boyfriend in middle school constitutes a felony offense here in the state of Ohio. The same individuals that we search for day after day who possess child pornography could very well be in possession of sexting-type material created by students right here in Aurora, Twinsburg, or Macedonia. And not a day goes by that we don't go out to schools and community groups and talk about internet safety where a student doesn't come up to us and say, sexting is a real problem in our school district. I've had students come up to me after most of the internet safety presentations I've done and say that sexting is a much bigger problem than we believe. We spend a lot of our time as a task force every single week going out and talking to students and parents about inappropriate material that has been placed on the internet. When you think about the fact that most devices nowadays, whether it be a mobile device, a tablet, or a laptop computer, that all of those have some sort of video recording capability, whether that be a camera or a webcam, you can see how easy it is for a student or a young adult to be curious about taking a photo that's inappropriate, sharing it with someone else, or at worst, being pressured or threatened to send this material out to the internet. We are a society today where texting is a big deal. Students, children, adults are all texting, communicating outside of traditional means. And one of the things that we want you to be aware of as a parent are the emojis that kids can use in some cases to represent their sexting or inappropriate activity. Okay? I think it goes without saying that I don't need to explain some of the emojis that you see here, but I want you to use sort of your imagination when it comes to how some of these emojis would relate to some of the activity, the inappropriate activity, and the sexting activity that we see as a task force. As a parent, if you are taking the time each night or every other day to go through your children's text messages, monitor who they're talking to, look at the apps and the sites that they're using, pay attention to some of the icons that you see here, some of the emojis that may indicate a bigger issue with your children with regards to sexting or inappropriate content. Okay? And I already mentioned this, but it's worth pointing out again. Okay? Sexting equates to child pornography and the existing child pornography laws here in the state of Ohio. Okay? The individuals that we charge with possessing child pornography, those are the same laws that we may turn around and charge a juvenile with if they engage in any of the activity that we talked about. And it certainly is not the mission of the Internet Crimes Against Task Force program to go after juvenile offenders. But we have spent more and more of our time dealing with these issues to the point of creating sexting diversion programs throughout the state to try and address this issue that we're currently dealing with. We are trying to educate children to the fact that once an image goes out onto the internet, once it is shared with that so-called trusted boyfriend or girlfriend or just simple friend from the neighborhood, that image is going to stay on the internet forever. Your best efforts to remove that photo, to delete it from an app or a profile, are completely null if an individual on the other end of that device or that internet site has already saved that image or video to their computer. We've seen instances where an image that is shared with one or two people is then found states away or countries away in the hands of a registered sex offender or another user who has found it online and has decided to either add it to their collection or share it with other users. And so we want to be very clear tonight about the dangers of sexting. And I would encourage parents and grandparents, caregivers in general, to go through your children or your grandchildren's devices tonight. Look at their galleries, look at the images and videos that they've created, and in some cases posted online. Companies like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are reporting images to us and to the other ICACs around the country at an alarming rate, because they are seeing these images and videos pop up on their sites and their apps, and they are letting us know about them so that we can go out and attempt to remove these images and also identify potential victims or online offenders. When we talk about sexting, it's worth noting that there are a number of apps that cater to sexting or inappropriate images or videos. Okay? Users, individuals who create this material, especially when it comes to children, know that they need to hide this material somewhere on their device. Okay? Most parents aren't educated enough to look at some of the apps that we consider to be vault applications. All right? The app that you see here is called Vaulty, and it's fairly obvious as an app because the minute you press on the icon that you see on the screen there, you're presented with a passcode. And so entering that passcode would allow you as a user access to an online vault, which would essentially allow you to not only hide media, images and videos that may be inappropriate, but you can also hide apps. You can also hide documents. Anything that is in an electronic format can be placed into this vault application, essentially restricting access to other users unless they know the passcode. A little more difficult of an application to identify is an application or an app that's been out for a few years now, and it's called the Secret Calculator. And as a parent, we would all be thrilled if we saw a calculator app on our child or our student's device. But this calculator application has a very sinister secret behind it, in that entering a certain code into the calculator allows you access to, as you see on the right there, a separate dashboard that, again, much like the Vaulty application, allows you to not only hide files, but also hide applications. And so if you are a student or a child that has restrictions about what kind of apps you can use or what types of pictures you can take, you can create this content or download these applications and then essentially hide them behind this fully working calculator. The calculator will do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. But by entering that code that I previously mentioned, it will allow that user into this dashboard to hide applications and files. And so again, it's worth noting as a parent to go through your child's device on a regular basis. Look at the icons. Talk to your children about the apps that they're using. If you don't recognize an icon or you have some concerns about a piece of software or an application that you see, Google it. Describe it in your search bar and see what comes up. Okay? One of the best tools that you have to understand applications is simply the Google Play Store or the iTunes Store. Find it in there, learn about what it does, what permissions it allows, and what its restrictions are and what it may allow you or a user to accomplish through the use of their technology. When we talk about internet safety, we need to talk about cyberbullying. And we see cyberbullying on a regular basis in most everything that we do with regards to internet safety. 81% of the teens that we've talked to think cyberbullying is easier than in-person bullying. And I would certainly agree with that. Because if you have a problem with someone at your school and you decide to bully that person in the hallway, okay, that takes a lot of guts, a lot of strength. Okay? But when you go home and you're online and you put that laptop or that device in front of your face, it's a lot easier to bully or cyberbully someone knowing that you're not standing right in front of them. We oftentimes talk about the internet and its ability to create a lot of tough guys. Students who forget that the next day or days later they may have to face that person that they've bullied face to face. And the problem with cyberbullying is that it allows users to spread the message, whether it's a threat or harassment, an extortion or a victimization, much further than just that one person. Cyberbullying takes many forms. You don't need to look further than a YouTube video or a news story in the comments section to see a lot of cyberbullying. We frequently talk to students who will share their passwords to their Facebook pages or their Instagram sites. A friend or a trusted friend or girlfriend or boyfriend then turns around, logs into that application to write harmful messages on the wall or to post inappropriate images or videos about that person. 70% of the students report frequent cyberbullying, and almost 43% have been bullied online. Cyberbullying is a problem that we are addressing in almost every single school that we go into. We're trying to talk to students about the dangers of cyberbullying and some of the things that they can do if they've been cyberbullied. And most importantly, we want students to realize that the internet, mobile technology are great tools when used appropriately. And it's very difficult to take something back after it's been put out online and then shared with hundreds, if not thousands, of students or individuals in that student's community. Now, if it sounds like this is a tidal wave of technology that's about to crash over you as a parent or a grandparent or a caregiver, take some comfort in the fact that there are things that you can do to stay ahead of this problem. It's not a matter of if something is going to happen to your child if they're using technology, but when. And as parents or grandparents, we want you to be aware and be ready for when those problems occur. You can certainly monitor and restrict purchases that your children make. As a parent, you should be able to set up social networking sites and mobile applications with your students or your children. Okay? Understand that most sites nowadays, most applications require your children to be 13 years of age, and that is a federal law that prohibits sites like Facebook and Instagram from collecting too much personal information about your children. Children, on the other hand, however, realize that all they need to do to get onto sites like Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, if they're under that certain age, is to lie about their age to get online. And by doing that, unfortunately, they then put themselves in contact with offenders or other users who may be older, and they may end up talking to these individuals when they shouldn't be. Okay? And so I would say to you, create child email accounts, create usernames, emails that allow you access to these apps and these social networking sites at the same time that they allow your children access to these sites. Okay? Most importantly, know their usernames, their email addresses, and their passwords. Okay? Not just to their email, but to every single site and to every single app that they use. Right? As a parent, when something happens, the last thing that you're going to want to do in that moment of desperation is to try and figure out your child's password or their username or what apps and sites they're actually using. Okay? You should have all of those written down or saved to your own device. And when you do that, your children know or your students know that they're less likely to get involved in something that they shouldn't be involved in. Okay? Our children are less likely to engage in risky behavior, engage in conversations with other users, if they know that mom and dad have access to their devices 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that brings me to my last important point there. Know your child's mobile device password. Okay? Mobile devices now are becoming more restrictive and more locked down than ever before. Okay? Most of the newer smartphones nowadays, if you don't know the password as a parent or a grandparent, you're not going to get access to that device. And so we would encourage you, having bought the device for your child 99% of the time, you have as much right to that device as they do. You should know their password, their pattern. In fact, put your thumbprint or your own face in that device to allow you access to that device when you need it. Okay? If a child goes missing and they leave their device at home, the device, whether it be a laptop or a mobile device or a tablet, that may be the best piece of evidence that we have as a task force or local law enforcement to be able to find out where that child went, or in some cases, who they may have been communicating with. As parents, I would also ask you to set some rules. Okay? And this is common sense, but as I said, you bought the device, your children live in your home, and they live under your roof, so have some rules that they can abide by. Right? Simple things like how much time they can spend online, okay? Where and when they can use the devices. Right? I oftentimes say that the two most dangerous rooms in your house are the bedroom and the bathroom. 2 rooms that have locks on the door, 2 rooms where children oftentimes are allowed to take devices with unrestricted access and no prying eyes. And time again, we see inappropriate images and videos created in these rooms that parents don't have access to. So set some rules, set some boundaries, okay? Limit the device usage to common areas of the home, areas where while your children are using their device, you have an opportunity to peer over their shoulder, walk by them on occasion, make sure they're not in areas of the internet or on applications that they shouldn't be on, okay? As I said earlier, know who they interact with. Sit down with your kids during this program or tonight and look at their buddy list, look at their friends list. It's concerning to us as a task force that there are kids we talk to at every internet safety presentation who say they have thousands of Facebook friends or thousands of Instagram friends. And when I ask the follow-up question to that of how many of those people do you know in real life, most kids say they know half of them. In some cases, they may only know 10 or 15%. So sit down with your kids tonight and go through their friends list. Go through the people that they follow and that they are allowing access to their social media sites. Most of the apps and internet sites that are out there today have a lot of good privacy features. Those privacy features, however, fall by the wayside when a student or a child has just one friend that they don't know in real life. And finally, what apps or sites that they can use. Okay. The other thing we talk to parents about on occasion is whether you should track your child. Okay. Most technology nowadays allows you to utilize GPS technology or location services. And I am a big proponent of having those location services turned on with regards to the device. There are a lot of good tools, there are a lot of good apps that allow you to track your child's location in terms of where they are when they're not at home, who they're with. If they're a driver and if they've just learned to drive, there are a lot of good apps that will monitor things that they do while they're in the vehicle. Now, with regards to location services for certain apps, I would say that's up to you as a parent, but understand that there are a lot of concerns that when a child is using Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, they may be broadcasting their location to not only their real friends, but also those online friends or those strangers that they're communicating with. Okay? We're told that Facebook and Instagram and all of these apps work better when location services are turned on. But we've seen a lot of cases where offenders or predators have determined a child's location because of their location services. Okay? Most newer phones now, if your GPS is turned on when you take a photo, it will embed that location or that latitude and longitude in that photo. And if a child is sending these images or videos to a stranger or an online offender, they are going to be broadcasting their information to that individual without even knowing it. As a parent, I would encourage you also to protect yourself at home. One of the biggest concerns that parents have is unsecured wireless or the internet in their home. I would encourage you, if you have a wireless hotspot, don't be the neighborhood Starbucks or McDonald's. Make sure you have a password on your network and make sure you know who is on that network at any given time. Okay? It's very easy to set up a password. It's very easy to restrict who has access to your wireless network. But every year as a task force, we go out into the community for an investigation or an operation, and we end up kicking in someone's door at 6 in the morning only to find out that they have unsecured wireless. To us as a task force and to local law enforcement, if you have unsecured wireless, an individual, a criminal, an online offender may be using your internet to commit their crimes, and that activity would appear to be coming from your residence. So I would encourage you tonight to make sure your internet is secure, make sure your children, your grandchildren are not giving out the password or allowing their friends or their strangers in some cases to share too much personal information. Okay. As I said earlier, it's not a matter of if, but when. So I would certainly encourage you to, document the incident if something occurs. As parents, our first instinct is to get online, berate the offenders, take action, let the offender know that we've gone to the police. But I would certainly encourage you to not retaliate or respond. As a task force, we work better when we have evidence. And as good as the internet is about keeping information, we would always encourage you as parents or grandparents to retain what you can, preserve what you can, turn it over to your local police departments or to the ICAC task force. Okay. One of the best tools that you have with regards to the online exploitation of children is through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And for decades now, the National Center has run the Cyber Tip Line, which is available through the website www.missingkids.com. And they run a 24-hour hotline as well as the website to allow individuals who want to report child exploitation, they can do so through the National Center's website. And as a task force, we receive hundreds of cyber tips every month dealing with everything from the online exploitation of children to material or content that has been posted to social networking sites and internet sites that violates those terms of service. In closing, I would certainly ask you to, if you are on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, the task force has a number of social media sites and a presence on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I would encourage you to follow us where we can provide current events, current cases that we're working, and a lot of internet safety information to keep you and your children safer. I would encourage you to stick around with us this evening. We're going to come back and talk to a panel of local experts here from Aurora, Twinsburg, and Macedonia, and answer some of your questions with regards to tonight's program. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kathy Powers, Superintendent with the Twinsburg City School District. Thank you for tuning in this evening for our first ever live streamed program. And we want to thank our friends at the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, our friends here at Community Focus, our partners at the Nordonia Hills Schools and the Aurora City School District, and of course our local law enforcement authorities who will be with us shortly to continue on with tonight's program. You know, nothing is more important to any of the superintendents in these three school districts than the safety of our students. And we realize that in today's day and age, our students sometimes don't have the tools to make the best choices. That's why programs such as this one are so important to our families. We hope that you have an opportunity to sit down and to discuss with your son or daughter the important information that you have already heard this evening and the important information that you're going to be hearing from our local law enforcement authorities here shortly. And we also are interested to know whether or not this live stream production is one that benefits your family. We know that parents are very, very busy. There are so many things going on in the evenings and throughout your work week. And we're hoping that this live stream production meets your needs. Dr. Joe Clark, Mr. Pat Sicantelli, and I would really like to hear from our parents with feedback about tonight's program, whether or not it is meeting your needs and whether or not this new way of producing information is appropriate for you and your family. Thank you very much for tuning in to our first ever live streaming production. We look forward to bringing additional important topics to your attention in this manner. Have a good evening.
Hello and welcome back. Again, I'm Pat Sicantelli, Superintendent of the Aurora City Schools, and we've got our panel here with us who I'm going to introduce. But first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Commander Frattare. That was an excellent presentation. Hopefully our parents, I'm sure they did, enjoyed that information. Joining us, though, this evening on our panel is Glenn Nickel, who is the School Resource Officer in the Rodonia Hill Schools and an officer in the Macedonia area. We've also got Chief Chris Noga from the Twinsburg Police Department. Welcome. And Chief Brian Byert from the Aurora Police Department. Welcome to the show. So you guys have got lots of experience in law enforcement. You know, Commander Frattare talked about the fact that, you know, this happens all over the place. Is it happening in our communities?
Yes. We've seen far more cases than I'd want to see in my career in our communities. I hate to use the word epidemic, but I think you could probably apply that to this situation with what's going on with our children and their use of the internet and some of the things that they're getting involved in. As the commander, pointed out in his presentation, it's scary both as a chief of police and as a parent.
Right.
And adding to that, what's even more scary is we only hear about a small percentage of it. There's a lot of it going on that we don't. It's never reported to law enforcement. That's kept, just within a network of students or between a student and a stranger or whatnot. So that's another reality that we have to face, that the percentage of it that's being reported.
So Commander Frattare talked about a lot of different issues. In your experiences in law enforcement, what is probably the primary issue parents should be looking for?
Probably just what their children are getting into on the internet. Keep an eye on where they're going, their searches, who they're talking to, check their phones, check all their apps, just stay on top of everything.
I think the reality of it is our kids are talking to people online. They have no idea who they're talking to. It puts that barrier up that you're not. You might be talking to another teenage boy, or you might be talking to a 60-year-old female. You just don't know. But our kids are just very trusting when they go online with their online relationships, and I think that's where things get dicey.
Yeah.
And just having that open dialogue with your children too. I mean, that goes a long way when they have when they feel like they can tell their parents things, and not fear repercussions, so to speak, and not only about themselves but about their fellow classmates. Just having that open dialogue means a lot.
So Commander Frattare, you talked a lot about the apps that are out there. What are some of the most popular ones? You hit on some of them today that parents should be looking for and should be leery of.
Well, I mean, parents like to believe that since they're on Facebook, that's the most popular app. But we're sort of telling parents, hey, you're behind the times. Right now, it's Instagram and Snapchat seem to be the two big ones that most students have gravitated to away from Facebook. But there are apps that come out every week, and that's the real struggle for us. Is that we may go out and do an internet safety presentation today and talk about the 13 apps that we showed you in the program. Next week, there may be 13 new apps that kids have used or kids have started using. When you think that there are hundreds of social networking apps and hundreds of apps that allow you to create content, post videos, you can see sort of the uphill battle that parents have as far as trying to keep track of those apps.
So you talked about a couple Vault apps as an example. That's not the extensive list of all the Vault apps that are out there.
No, there are hundreds of thousands of apps that do a number of different things, and they come out at an alarming rate that kids seem to be the first ones to sort of pick up on them. They hear about them at school, they start using them, and to the point earlier, we want parents to sit down with their kids and have the students or the kids help their parents understand exactly what they're doing on their phones or their devices.
Yeah. So for the law enforcement officials, if something happens and your child sends a picture of themselves, what can a parent do once that picture's out there?
Nothing. I mean, it's notify law enforcement, of course, and we obviously want to know who that picture went to, and we'll make contact with them. But what parents have to realize, and students themselves, is a lot of these apps aren't here in the States. They're ported through other countries that don't recognize, search warrants and subpoenas and things of that nature from a local law enforcement or federal, for that matter. So it's very difficult and very time-consuming for us to try to get that chat down or get that picture down if it's one that's up there. But even then, that picture could have been shared, one time, or it could have been shared 10,000 times. And, we have to go directly to the source, and that's the bottom line.
The reality is once you hit that send button, it's out there forever.
Yeah.
There's really no taking it back. And unfortunately, kids aren't wired to understand that, to understand that concept that once you send it out there, chances are it can show up anywhere.
Yeah.
And it could follow you around for the rest of your life.
So we're getting questions from our live stream audience, which is great. So I'm going to read one, and whoever would like to take it. So the first question I have is, what are the penalties for a child who is sending or receiving sexting messages?
It's child pornography. It is a felony through the juvenile court, and it can be considered a sex offender, even if you're the one sending it or receiving it and resending it.
And so, one of the things we've heard in our experiences is sometimes the parents of, let's say, the female who sent the picture because it was encouraged by her boyfriend feels as if the girl's a victim. That's not the case, is it?
Not really. I mean, the reality is that, they've technically committed a criminal act. And again, it comes down to, a juvenile, a teenager, not really understanding the concept of what the law says.
And our goal here isn't to, we'd rather be educate
Sure.
the kids. It's not to be punitive in nature, but every year it seems like we go out, and I'm sure Twinsburg and Macedonia do the same thing, and we educate these kids. But the first thing they seem to do when they get some type of juicy gossip through the thread is to forward it on to their whole entire network, and therefore that alone is a crime in itself, and kids don't realize that, and it's a scary fact that we face, though.
It's been eye-opening because in a lot of the internet safety presentations we do at the middle school and the high school level, students will say they didn't realize that it was against the law. If, I'm 13 and my boyfriend's 13, they say I didn't realize it was against the law. So, we're trying to educate the student population, young adults, to that fact.
And you use the age of 13. I guess I'd want the parents to make sure that they're aware. If you've got a 10, 11, 12-year-old, that's not too young. We're seeing sexting at that age level. Is that correct?
We're seeing a lot of things at that age level, a lot of disturbing things from kids that age. And I mean, you would think that it was the older kids, the high school kids, but we've dealt with not only high school kids, but middle schoolers, and also as young as 12.
And those are the kids that are completely unaware of the ultimate consequences for that. Not only the law enforcement perspective, but where that picture's going, who they're talking to, because they're obviously not mature at that point yet, so they don't understand it fully.
Right. That the ramification, it could affect them for the rest of their life.
Correct.
It could show up on a job application 10 years later.
And the way of doing those background checks or job applications when these kids do their resumes for college or whatnot, it's as simple as Googling somebody's name,
Right.
and you see pictures that you never would think that would be out there, and it says a lot about somebody.
All right. One of the other questions we got from Lisa was, what are your thoughts about the app TikTok?
So TikTok is sort of the new Musical.ly. There was an app a year or so ago called Musical.ly, and TikTok has sort of become that app. Very creative app, allows you to create little short videos and then post them out to the internet. But like anything, it's really what the material is or what the content is, but also who is then following that user. We see some of these TikTok accounts that have hundreds of thousands of users, hundreds of thousands of followers. And if you're a child in your bedroom that's being creative and you're posting those videos out to that app, you have to think about who's going to end up watching those videos and then what they may try to do with that user or that victim if they know that child is somebody that may create material.
Okay. Sandy on Facebook, and so sexting probably being one of the bigger challenges, bullying obviously one of the other ones that you emphasized today. When is it considered bullying? What is cyberbullying? When does it cross the line and become bullying?
Well, that's that changes in everybody's eyes. I mean, it's obviously it's you look at the amount of social disorders in schools today, just because what we used to see as young kids is what was right in front of us, and now somebody's words can go a long way very quickly, and across the country for that matter. But bullying, I guess, is perceived, and it depends on the nature of the material, but anything that causes somebody else distress or any type of anxiety issue, to the point where they might want to do bodily harm to themselves, or even just causes them to feel unwanted or ashamed, so to speak.
Okay, so we've got Dana on Facebook who said, besides banning your child completely from the internet, what are some of the tools available to limit their use of questionable apps?
Well, nothing is better than being a parent. And I know that's easier said than done, but we get questions all the time about what apps can I install, what software can I buy. There are some good apps that are out there. There's some good software that you can put to monitor devices, but nothing is better than every night, every other night, taking that device, having access to it, and going through the text messages, the gallery, and some of the apps that are there. Because most of the software you're going to buy, most of the apps that you're going to use for internet safety, it's not going to do what you need it to with regards to hidden messages, access to vault apps. That's really where, as a parent, when you come across those things, you sit your child down and you say, here's the reality. You're either going to let me into these apps, you're going to share what you're doing, or you're not going to have your device anymore. And I think when presented with those two options, most kids are going to choose to allow mom and dad access, as opposed to losing that sacred device of theirs.
Yeah,
and you have to start early too. From the minute they get their phone, there has to be an understanding, or their smart device, that you're going to go on a regular basis and check in, because if you wait a year and then you feel suspicious about something, then there's that breach of trust, so to speak. So just doing it often, and going on and being friends with them, and allowing you to be friends, so that you can see what they're doing, and when they share a photo, you can see it as well. Right. And that's important as well.
So one of the things that we know that a lot of students do is the gaming. And it can include, it doesn't matter the game, obviously, because it's an internet connection. It could be FIFA soccer or Madden football. What are some of the kinds of things? How do parents help supervise and make sure their children are in a safe scenario or a safe environment when they're gaming?
Well, again, I think it comes back to who they're gaming with. I mean, most games you can see who they're playing against. Most games have a profile or some information about that user. I mean, when you think of a simple game like Words with Friends, okay, it's a game where kids can learn words and there's some educational value to it, but they're playing with someone else that again, could be a close friend of theirs or a complete stranger. And so, nothing wrong with, from time to time, either playing the games with your own kids or sitting down with them as they play, and interacting and asking, who is this person? How long have you been playing with them? What do you know about them? And importantly, what information have you shared? I watch my son play his video game, and he's got his headset on, and he's talking to users while he's playing the game. Conceivably, he could be giving out a lot of personal information, not really realizing what he's been giving away or who he's talking to. So, I mean, from time to time, we want parents to, hang out with their kids, watch what they're doing, learn what they're doing, and who they're doing it with.
So you talk about personal information. What are some of the boundaries for personal information? What are some of the absolute no's that kids should, as far as sharing when they're talking?
Definitely not a date of birth or home address or where they go to school, a phone number, especially if you have absolutely no idea who you're communicating with. I think those are just some of the basics.
And to kind of piggyback off what Chris said, when everything these kids search, they can, like I said before, they have the world at their fingertips now. Everything they search is kind of creating an online profile for them. So when you're searching things that might be questionable in nature, you're going to get ads, pop-ups from questionable sites. And that's the type of stuff you start clicking on them, and they start enticing you into, what's your email address, what's your phone number, and it's no different than going into a retail store now, where everybody wants to give you a customer courtesy card where they want your email address. Well, they turn around and they sell that information. So you have to be aware. You're creating an online profile for everything you do on the web.
And to the commander's point, the rule when I was growing up is mom and dad wanted to know who all my friends were. You couldn't go hang out at somebody's house unless we knew, they knew who I was hanging out with and knew the parents. I think that rule still applies. It's just a little more difficult to do that in an online world, but it obviously can be done.
Right.
Well, and we are also a society where it's acceptable now to share, our thoughts, our opinions, how we're feeling. And so, I mean, I consider that personal information as well. If a child has a bad day at school or they're in a fight with their parents and they come home and they tell their internet friends that, oftentimes those offenders may use that information or that material against them or to essentially help groom that child. If mom and dad aren't allowing you to do something, I'm your online friend and I'm going to allow you to do that, or I'm going to help you do that. And the child starts to sort of develop that relationship with that offender to the point where they feel comfortable, meeting in public or accepting gifts from that individual, or worse, sending inappropriate material to that offender.
And we've talked about how this can obviously be national and international as far as the exposure. Talk about, any of you, the idea of grooming and the fact that it hits in any community, suburban communities like the ones we live in, and it's a factor.
We had a case more than a few years ago where a girl was interacting, a teenage girl was interacting online with what turned out to be a 25-year-old male down in Texas, and he actually drove up here, and she had not a great relationship with her parents, and actually ran away with him down to Texas. And it was good police work and a good relationship with the FBI. That year, that Thanksgiving morning, they were able to go and find her and bring her back home before something very tragic could have happened. So it's really not that hard to do, and we just have, again, it's that awareness of things and being aware of what can be done.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of missing child cases that, a child goes missing only after 2 or 3 weeks of engaging in online conversation with someone they had never met before. And that's really demonstrates how powerful the internet is, that in a short span of time, a child who maybe is not in the greatest situation or is going through some issues in life would take comfort in an online offender or a complete stranger and be okay walking out his or her front door, getting into a car with a random stranger, and then driving hundreds, thousands of miles somewhere else.
Yeah, and you've seen it in suburban communities, rural communities. It's not a problem for just some; it's a problem for all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And these problems, like not to say that they don't still happen, but the traditional old school kidnapping off the street corner. I mean, the people are much more likely to be enticed, to Commander Frattare's point, through the online social media apps and groomed at a slow process and then enticed out of their home with empty promises by a mature 40-year-old mind or 50-year-old mind to an immature 12 or 14-year-old girl or boy.
And I know you hit on it in the presentation, but maybe let's refresh or review again. So what would it look like? What can a parent be looking for in a grooming situation?
Well, I think there's a number of red flags they can look for. I mean, most kids are going to start acting a little different. They may be withdrawn from their real friends. They may spend more time online. They may try and hide what they're doing on their devices from their parents. Maybe normally they're open and now they're spending more time in their room or interacting in the online environment. But typically those are some of the things that we want parents to look for. I mean, really just the changes in the behavior, and maybe the child is dressing differently or taking more photos than they have in the past.
So in a grooming, you talked about on a gaming, you can see some level of profile. And this is a question from Fran on Facebook. How can a parent tell if a follower on a site, so maybe even an app or someone that they've become friends with, is potentially risky? Are there some ways that parents can start to be aware of the potential danger?
Well, I think that comes from, again, paying attention to what the children are what the apps they're using, who they're communicating with, and what's being said. You're not going to know much about a user from an initial profile. I mean, there's zero ways to tell if someone is who they say they are.
Fake their profile
on the internet. So oftentimes cases come to us after there's been a conversation, after there's been an exchange of images or videos. That may be a parent's first indication that something's not right, or that the individual on the other end can be potentially risky. But you really need to monitor the conversations, monitor the interactions. That's where we start to see a lot of the red flags that we can then sort of take action with.
And in reality, you know, Pat, I mean, there's really no reason for a young child to have, you know, an anonymous relationship online with somebody that they can never verify their true identity. I mean, it's different for kids, you know, that are going to college and they belong to sites to try to, you know, seek out roommates or whatnot, and you can verify the identity of somebody, but there's really no advantage to an anonymous online relationship. I mean, it has little value.
So I know working in the schools, we're starting to see students in first and second grade with Apple Watches, starting to get phones for sure by third grade. Do you have any recommendations to parents? I mean, what is the ideal age, and why do kids that young, do they need devices?
That's a good question.
That's a tough question.
That's a tough question.
We get
I know
that
it's a
question
personal
lot.
choice.
We bought our own kids devices when they started going out of the home with their
More
friends or
regularly.
with other family members when they were not, you know, in our line of sight.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the problem, is that I see, you know, kids as young as 5 and 6 with some of the top tech products that are out there, and you know, parents are giving kids devices, you know, without any sort of instruction or safety warnings. You know, when you think about the process to be able to drive a car here in the state of Ohio, okay, what you have to go through, the tests you have to take, the practice that you have to have, and yet when we give our kids a device that's extremely powerful, that could be a weapon in some cases, we simply hand it over to them and we say, have fun. Most of those parents don't know how to operate those devices. I mean, I've seen parents who have a flip phone that have given their child the latest and greatest, you know, iPhone 10. And so there's a huge technology gap there that we need to sort of, you know, shrink so that parents understand exactly what goes on with these devices.
One of the things that we hear in the schools, and again, this is open to anybody, is, you know, some parents feel like they've done a really good job of filtering their Wi-Fi. So they've got controls and filters on their Wi-Fi. Help share about all the opportunities that kids are going to have unfiltered Wi-Fi, or by using cellular data to get full access.
Anytime you're out of the house, I mean, if you don't have control over the Wi-Fi network, it's, you know, it's a Wild West.
And with that, you know, the parents sometimes just, you know, they may take a device away and assume that they're punishing the child, but not realizing that, you know, your iPad, you know, you have a lot of different devices that you can do the same thing on, so you're really not cutting off communication unless you basically shut your Wi-Fi down in your house, or you ensure that you have all those devices secured.
Yeah.
And there are a number of apps that allow you to text and broadcast video that, you know, only require Wi-Fi. You may not need a data signal. You may not need a phone number for them. Some of the biggest problem apps that we've dealt with are problematic because a child may just have a tablet or an iPod that connects to Wi-Fi. They don't need the phone number. They don't need the data plan, but it still allows them to do everything that they can do with a traditional mobile device.
Yeah. So parenting today is just a lot more challenging. I mean, you know, kids are going to have devices, and they're going to have multiple devices. So you talked a little bit about what are some of the constraints within your home, is keeping, you know, out of close spaces, bedrooms. What are some of the other tips that you would give for monitoring kids when they're in your home?
Definitely, the rule in my house is anything done online has to be done on the family computer downstairs. You know, it's got to be in view. If there's any type of questionable activity, a pop-up or a request or anything like that, then they have to come talk to me. They've got to find me, and I've got to filter through it. I don't let them access sites that, you know, that they're not sure of. So it's just, again, it comes back to being an involved parent and understanding that, yeah, it is a little more challenging. It's a heck of a lot more work than what my parents had to do with me, I think. But there are kids, and it has to be that way.
And the bottom line is, it comes down to that trust factor. I mean, you know, deep down inside, and you, like Commander Frattare said, you know, your behaviors of your child changes, then it's kind of what we call a sign, you know, a clue that something's not right. And so just knowing your child, you know, and knowing who they're hanging out with, you know, because the old saying, you know, the birds of the feather flock together, can't be further from, I mean, closer to the truth. It's
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
One of the simple things you can do is just, make your children plug their devices into, either your bedroom, the parent's bedroom, or a common area. Every night we require our kids to plug their devices in the kitchen. Because a lot of the activity that we see occurring occurs between the hours of, 10 p.m. and 2, 3 in the morning.
Right.
My daughter tried to pull a fast one. She said, "Dad, I need the phone for my alarm." And I said, "Well, we can solve that problem." And we went out and we bought her one of those big, giant LCD alarm clocks. And we said, "Here you go. You set it for a time and the buzzer goes off and you know to wake up." So,
right.
But we have parents who allow their kids to, charge the device in their bedroom. They're probably up at all hours of the night. And that's when we see a lot of this inappropriate activity or these online conversations occurring. And, it's something as simple as, putting those devices away at the end of the night or charging them in view of, parents or caregivers.
Yep. And if you're not sure, look at the history. If they haven't deleted it yet, which many times they don't, we've seen that in schools, where a student will be exhausted. The teacher will literally look at their Chromebook and see that they were hitting the internet all night long. And it was, and it's the same scenario. When they ask the student many times, why did you have it in your room? Well, I need it for an alarm. I needed to do my homework. They are so good and clever at coming up with ways that make parents feel like, well, living and having their room, it's not about the device. It's because they're going to do something productive with it, or they need it for a certain reason. Well, it's a challenge. We don't have all the answers, right? I mean, but hopefully this program will help everybody have at least some better ideas. Is there anything else that our panel would like to add for parents before we kind of close down for the evening?
I would just encourage parents to, work with their school district or their local community. We do more than 200 internet safety presentations every year throughout the state of Ohio. A lot of them to the middle school, the elementary school level kids. Time to time we get into the elementary schools, but we provide these presentations free to the community in an effort to, not only educate students, but more importantly, educate the parents.
Be involved. Be an involved parent. I mean, as much as the internet can be a distraction for our children, it certainly can be a distraction for parents as well. And take that time to put the devices down every now and again and actually have a conversation with your children.
Right.
Yeah, like Chris said, just live a morally sound life and teach your kids to do the same and understand that they have the world at their fingertips, not like you and I when everybody had the same set of encyclopedias and only had the knowledge that encyclopedia provided. They can look up anything, virtually anything, and if they get into the dark web, it's even a much more scarier place. So just be involved, like Chris said.
And check the phones. Check their phones and where they've been on it.
Yeah.
They need to do that.
Know what they're doing.
Parents got to realize it's their phone, not their child's phone.
Right. Right. Well, thank you for being here. We really appreciate that you guys have shared your expertise and the information. For our parents, we are going to have a videotape of this program, and so I know all 3 school districts will be running it on their website, so we'll have that opportunity. So if your friends or your neighbors weren't tuned in tonight and you think this would be pertinent information for them, there'll be opportunities for them to get access to it. This is also going to probably be a series of programs that we're going to run related to internet safety and all kinds of tips and programs for parents that will help them in what is a challenging time with all the technology and the opportunities for kids to share information and to be in places that you're just not familiar with. So again, thanks for tuning in this evening. We hope you enjoyed the program. Have a great evening.